This is the Serrano Brothers Podcast.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Serrano Brothers Podcast. Today, we have on our show Regina Banks. Oh, this is going to be so exciting. Regina is the director of the Lutheran Office of Public Policy in California, for California. Is that how you would say that?
In California. I have colleagues in other parts of the country that make sure I say the California part because there are other LOPPs.
Oh, does every state have an LOPP?
No, not every state. So, hi, everyone. I am the director of the Lutheran Office of Public Policy, California. It is a state public policy office of the ELCA. And there are four fully ELCA state public policy offices. So I am an employee of the churchwide organization. My headquarters is in Chicago. My computer comes from them, all of that. And so California, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, they are all fully ELCA. Then we have several state public policy offices that are embedded into synods. So Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and the Southeastern Synod all have state public policy offices, but those directors are synod employees. And then we've got another dozen or so organizations that are interfaith or ecumenical organizations that through ELCA World Hunger supports in whole or in part. And so if you are in Texas, Florida, Virginia, Kansas, Washington State, then you go to those interfaith or ecumenical organizations. So it's a nice mix of the way that we come to the work. But those are the other LOPPs, but it's Lutheran Office of Public Policy, Wisconsin as well. So I have a colleague who makes sure that I say the California because Wisconsin is in there.
That's awesome.
Well, let's back up a little bit. How did you get to be the director of Lutheran Office of Public Policy, and kind of what led you up to this kind of work?
I wake up daily asking myself that very same question. I am the first, usually when people ask me that question, they ask me whether I grew up Lutheran, whether I am Lutheran now. I am Lutheran now, but I did not grow up Lutheran. I went to a historically Black college at Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri. And that was such a transformational experience for me that going to a institution of higher education that controlled for helped me to engage with a part of my identity in a way that I could not have done in some other way. So when I was getting ready to go to law school, I said, I want to do that again. What's another identity that I can explore? If there was such a thing as an all-women's law school, I would have done that. There's not. So I'm like, okay, another way of doing it is to engage with my faith. So I said, what are the law schools that have a faith component? And I got my heart set on Notre Dame. I was going to go to Notre Dame. It was going to happen. Notre Dame is in South Bend, Indiana, from Missouri, and California is my home. And so I was going to go, did the LSAT, got my grades and everything together. And I get a phone call from a recruiter at Valparaiso University. Valparaiso is a pan-Lutheran institution in Northwest Indiana. And they said, if you are a Black woman with these grades from California who's willing to come to Indiana, let Notre Dame pay for you to come out and see the campus, and then drive over to Valpo and see us. And I'm like, that's cheeky, but sure. But I still have my heart set on Notre Dame, right? So I go and I see it, and it's a nice campus, and people are really kind to me. And I established that I can get a good education there. And then I got the financial aid packages from each of the schools. And Notre Dame was going to give me a single scholarship that would have covered a book. And Valpo gave me full tuition, room, board, books, everything, pay nothing, come here, we want you. And my father sat me down and he said, honey, I love you very much and I will always support you emotionally. But if you turn down all of this money, like financially, you're on your own.
And did you receive that wisdom?
Yes.
Where's the Holy Spirit speaks through? So I went to Valpo, and it was the very best. It was the very best decision that I could have made. So skip ahead. I'm working in the legal field. I always did want to do public policy. I wanted to do advocacy. I was doing that. I kind of fiddled around and ended up at Davis Law School. I was the law clinic coordinator at UC Davis, and lovely human people. If they happen to see this, great. It wasn't the place for me. I was not enjoying that gig, and so I put my resume, different words from my resume in with job into Google, and was just like coming up with jobs. I had no idea that LOPP existed. I really had no functional idea that the ELCA existed. Although my scholarship came from the ELCA, it wove itself into the law school. So I knew that they were there. They just weren't a part of my life. And I came up with the job description that is this job. And I'm like, oh, this could be cool. But I just needed a job at that point, right? So you're just applying to a bunch of things. And then I get a phone call from John Johnson, who ultimately did become my supervisor. And he said, look, we've seen your resume, we see your reputation, we want to talk to you, but it's going to take us 2.5, 3 weeks over the Thanksgiving holiday. This is 2018, over the Thanksgiving holiday, for us to get it together. Can you hold out that long for an interview? And I'm like, sure, whatever. And in that 2.5 weeks, I read every social statement and every social message that existed to prepare for that interview. And I became Lutheran then. Became an ELCA Lutheran then. And long story short, I got the role. It's been exactly what I needed and what I needed to be doing in that time. But I was recruited, I was converted, I was convinced by the social statements and social messages. So like that is my testimony for the ELCA and for this.
Wow. You said you didn't grow up Lutheran. What was there a faith tradition that you did grow up in, a denomination or
I am a good AME girl, African Methodist Episcopal Church. My dad calls himself a recovering Catholic, so we didn't that's what he did. But my mother's family and our extended family were AME. I did AME in undergrad. I'm engaging now with how much of that do I miss, how much of it do I need, how often do I need to hear that music and that liturgy of my youth. So yeah.
No, thanks for sharing. Do you sorry, I'm looking at the questions. Could you okay, so LOPP in California, how long has it been around here? Like how long, what's the history of LOPP, especially in California?
LOPP predates the ELCA. LOPP came with the ALC. It's not the oldest, Pennsylvania is the oldest, but it's the second or third oldest state public policy office. And it's gone through many iterations, but it was one of the I read this like a couple of months ago. It was one of the agreements that was a part of the ELCA. If you're going to take us, you're going to take our state public policy office as well, which I find that to be very interesting and exciting. And it has changed with the times of California. It has changed with the passion projects of the directors, but has always been funded by World Hunger. And so I'm in my office here at St. John's Lutheran Church in Sacramento, California, which is where we've been housed all of that time, I believe. And I've got history surrounding me of what previous directors have done, but what the through line is hunger. When I make a presentation about our budget, when I make a presentation about what LOPP has accomplished in the previous year and what we want to accomplish in the year to come, I need to be able to make a good faith argument about how it affects people and hunger. So that's the through line here in California.
That's
And
really
I think
cool.
that's so important. We at Good Shepherd here in Concord we are laser focused on feeding the hungry, and I can tell you that the amount of food that we're giving out has doubled in the last 6 months, and it is it's a problem. I mean, and we're seeing it in the amount of clients and new clients that we are getting on a regular basis here.
Thank you so much for the work that you do. I've heard about that, not just from you, but from your clients in your community. It is a well-known and respected ministry. Thank you for that. When I talk to congregations who have those kinds of ministries, those kinds of feeding ministries, I ask them to think just one more step out.
Please.
Why? Like, why?
Yeah.
What are the conditions in your community that make feeding, what has happened in the last 6 months? Housing costs have gone up in the last 6 months. Inflation has gone up in the last 6 months. We are gearing up for an election cycle. That has happened in the last 6 months. There are a host of things that happen that trickle down is the wrong term, but influence and impact people's access to food and food security. And it is my role to help congregations and ministries think about that and think, what can we do about the root causes of hunger such that we can work ourselves out of a job? I believe you don't want to be doing that. You're doing it because you have to, and I appreciate that. What can we all do together that puts us out of the feeding work? And so that's my role. That's what I help people to do and help people to engage.
So what does your job look like then? Like, you're engaging with congregations, you're engaging with the state. Like, walk us through kind of your job.
Yeah. So there are two big pieces. Well, there's 2.5 big pieces of my job. So the first part of my job is to engage with the California State Legislature. So I have social statements, social teachings in hand, and I know what it is that the ELCA says that it believes, what our congregations say that they believe about social justice and social ministry. And so I look at the California State Legislature, I look at the executive branch, mostly it's the legislative branch, but it's some executive branch and some local, and I say, what policies, this is like just straight up legislative advocacy, which policies best live into those social statements and social teachings? On some level, you're trusting me that I understand those social statements and teachings well. I engage with alliances, California Interfaith Coalition, Building the California Dream Alliance, Green California, et cetera, to influence the state legislature. That's the first part. The second part is engaging with our congregations, synods here in California, to explain to them what it is that I just did. Having the conversation back with them that says, we've got these new tools, or this tax incentive has just been passed. We've just made it so that the earned income tax credit is lower, so that when you're engaging, is the earned income tax credit is higher and it requires a lower threshold to participate. So when you're engaging with people who are at your feeding ministries and they're like, I just need another $500. Oh, have you filed your taxes yet? There's this new, so like giving you that information so that you can pass that along to your congregations. And I said 2 and then said 2.5. The other half is that I'm a church-wide employee. And so translating what the California legislature is doing, what our synods and congregations in California are doing, back to the church-wide organization, such that our social statements and social teachings reflect what it is that we're doing with them. I've been in several of those conversations. working with our service and justice colleagues, helping to influence what we are looking for in World Hunger grantees, because we've got that experience here as well. So it is multifaceted. I have not, in the roughly 5 years that I've been in this gig, I don't believe I've had the same day twice. I certainly haven't had it 2 days in a row. um, and it is my highest and best use. I cannot imagine having done anything else.
It sounds like an exciting job.
It is. I mean, I say that with a little tongue in cheek, because some of it is like reading arcane tax policy and like
Right,
being in the legislature, uh, a hearing that's supposed to start at 10:30 that starts at 5:15, and like that's your day, because we're all at the speed of government around here. But I love it. I really do. And then, I get to add, I have always been a church nerd. I am a church nerd girl. And so when I get ready to report back to congregations about what I'm doing, when I report back to synods about what I'm doing it in church.
Nice.
It's like I get to do it like at coffee hour between services when I come to visit congregations. Side note, I have yet to be invited to either of your congregations.
So actually, that was my next
Yeah,
question for you. I'm a parish pastor. You have always kind of been around, and so has the LOPP, but I wasn't ever really sure what y'all did and how you represented our church. We're laser focused on feeding people. How can I, as a parish pastor, and as a proxy for all other parish pastors listening to this, how can I be more connected to your office and the work that you're doing, so that I can elevate my people's vision to root cause mitigation rather than just being on the front lines?
Great question. So the two times that probably the easiest way to access what we do here at LOPP, if you're not already tapped in, we'll get to the things that you can do. If you're already, once we get you hooked into advocacy, there's some other things that you can do. But if you're not already tapped in, twice a year, we do something that could be, should be, we hope is valuable to all of our congregations. And that is, here in California, we have a really robust proposition regime. Like, you can get on the ballot in California with all kinds of different issues that we as voters hope, those of us who have the privilege of being able to vote in the United States and in California, special interests, and I use that term without not pejorative at all, but special interests get their issue on the ballot, and then we as voters get to decide how we feel about that. And it's often really confusing. It's often like paragraphs and paragraphs worth of information that we're not thinking about on a daily basis. Millions of dollars is invested in trying to persuade us one way or another, and we just don't have a framework of how to work on it. And every year when we have ballot measures come up, LOPP does a voter guide, and our voter guide is straight off of our social statements and social teachings. When we give a suggested yes or a suggested no, it is suggested yes, and here's the page number and paragraph of the social statement that says that is why we are saying yes or no. And we're not in the ballot booth with you. We can't control what it is that you do with your vote. Do as you will. But people of goodwill who have studied the social statements and social teachings, live here in California and care, have looked at it, and this is where we go with that information. So we do that every time that there is an election that has those ballot measures on it. Similarly, at the end of the year, at the end of the legislative session, so in California, the legislature is a 2-year legislature, and it ends at the end of September, the end of October, depending on the year. And then all of the bills that passed, we give an update not on every bill that went through the legislature, because there's all over 2,000 of them, but of the bills that we have been studying, we say, these are the bills that we've been studying. This is why. Here are the social statements and social teachings that gave us ground to be paying attention to them. Here's how they ended up, and here are the legislators who were for and against them. You all are about to be able to vote for. I mean, at the end of the 2 years, you're about to be able to vote to keep them or not. Here's what. Again, we're not in the ballot booth with you, but here's what happened from our common ELCA Lutheran perspective. And I have heard for the last 5 years that is the most valuable thing that we are able to do for our California folks. If you don't know what it is that I do every day in the legislature, if it would take too long for me to explain it to you, if you don't care, if you've got other things to worry about, those two things, at best, it's twice a year, you can engage with us to do that. That end of year wrap up is coming up on November 1st. So I'd be more than happy to share with you the link that is up on our website. Join us. Low lift, just listen to what it is that we've been doing and listen to who has been supporting us and who we have yet to convince. And then next year when we've got ballot measures, you can be on the lookout for that.
And is there anything legally that I need to be aware of? Can I just share this information with my congregation?
You can just share the information with your congregation. So I'm not even registered as a lobbyist. I've refused to register as a lobbyist for the ELCA. I'm the director of policy. I'm here to help direct your efforts. You don't want me in the legislature full-time doing that. And even if you did, I'm a churchwide employee. If 100% of my time were spent lobbying, it still is compared to all of the rest of the time of every other churchwide employee. You're fine. And in terms of you're not, what I just be careful, you're not telling people how to vote. Your church is not telling you how to vote.
Right.
I don't care. Right. I'm giving you information about bills that have passed and our social statements and social teachings. And as long as you frame it from there, okay, you're good to go.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, and it seems like a really good thing that the way you do it is just, we've already come out with social statements, right? It's not like you're reinventing anything. You're an interpreter, it seems like, of putting these things together, right? That's what it seems like.
That is 100% right. It saves me a lot of so first of all, it saves me a whole lot of time. The social statements and teachings have been written. When I get ready to write a letter to the legislature or to the governor, I literally cut and paste. It's my favorite thing. I'm inventing nothing. And when I do have a close question about, is this bill, it's usually not when the bill is introduced. It's usually when the bill is amended to soften it some kind of way, or, to garner. I'm like, is this still on our? I've got policy council members from all three synods. Bishop David Nagler from Pacifica Synod is our bishop, representative to the policy council. I say, this is the position we took. This is the way it's been amended. Are we still where are we now? And I get feedback from lay people, rostered people, bishops, ethicists. I'm not inventing this. I'm not telling, I'm just copy and pasting most of the time. So yeah.
So it does, I'll ask this question. So do you, when legislation comes out, are you ever advocating for, like, we really want you to put this on the ballot, because we care about hunger, or do you allow what's the interplay there? Is there ever a time where you're like, we really need to deal with hunger in this way, and you tell your representative that? Or
so it has not happened for ballot measures. Ballot measures are their own animal, and I'm not saying that we never would at LOPP. I'm just saying that there is enough other work that we don't have to split our time that way. So if the big thing comes along and they say we just cannot move this ballot measure without LOPP's co-sponsorship, will you do it? Sure, let's have that conversation. But it hasn't come up. What has happened most recently, and thank you for formulating the question that will allow me to brag on our policy council here right now, is I believe, and my policy council agrees with me, that the moral issue in California of our time is housing and homelessness.
Yeah.
When you talk about what is a driver of food insecurity, those people who are housing secure are doing it at 50, 60, 70% of their income, which means that something else has got to give. And the thing that typically gives is food. And then if you don't have that money to put into rent, then you end up housing insecure. And that is due to a host of reasons in California. And so for the last 3 years, LOPP has been working on not just what can Californians do, but what can faith community Californians do? Like, where is our special niche in this? And our special niche often, as faith communities writ large, but as ELCA congregations in particular, is that we are land rich.
Yep.
Several of our congregations are sitting on valuable land alone, or sitting on valuable land and they've got like a 50-acre parking lot. That's being extreme, but and we're not alone in that. Our Episcopal siblings, our Presbyterian siblings, our Jewish siblings are in a lot of the same position. So just this year, after several years of advocating, we passed SB 4. So Senate Bill 4, we're organizational co-sponsors. You did this, I did this, we did this together. It would allow us to build 100% affordable housing on faith lands and nonprofit colleges and universities. Looking at you, California Lutheran. And independent of how those areas are zoned. Now, of course, there are still rules. You would have to still meet building requirements, but that's huge. When I talk to congregations about what is it that you see around you that you would like to be able to address, housing, what's stopping you? Can't get permit to do it. Can't get zoned to do it. We're zoned commercial. We're zoned mixed use, and we're not able to do it. Gotcha. We gotcha. And that was just signed 2 weeks ago by Governor Newsom. Party is on Wednesday in San Francisco. Yeah. So, I mean, that kind of thing, when it is clearly, squarely in our social statements and teachings, but is, if not us, will not get done, then that is our value add to our congregations, because we've given them this tool, and to our siblings in California who are waiting for some moral authority and waiting for some moral action to come from their faith-based neighbors. And this is where LOPP comes in.
Can I ask a question about housing and why is housing so much in California right now? Why has it increased exponentially? I live in a pretty I feel like I live in a pretty middle-class neighborhood, but when I got here, houses were like $900,000. And now houses are over $2.5 million. So even though to me, they look like normal kind of middle-class houses, they are so much money that it's like, it doesn't make any sense to me. It makes no sense to me. Why is this happening in California? We
haven't built the housing stock. So there's two pieces. I mean, like any other, economics 101, there's supply and demand, right? So if you artificially keep supply low, then values go up. And we have done that for decades in California. And I'm not even suggesting that there are any malicious actors, just self-interested ones, right? So if I if I build into that vacant land, if I build on that vacant land, then we're going to have to put infrastructure there. We're going to have to build a school there. My taxes are going to go up to build that house over there. Why would I do that? Because A, it's going to lower my property value, because more supply means my property value goes down, and my taxes are going to go up in order to put the infrastructure over there. That doesn't check. And the person who was without a home because we didn't build over there isn't in my face every day, or wasn't in my face every day until they were, right? So there's that one piece. And then if there is a bad actor, just for Regina, I'm now not speaking for LOPP. I'm here and I'm seeing the thing. If there is a bad actor, we have institutional investors. So your family has a home, I have a home, my family have homes, and we are all struggling to pay the bills, struggling to pay the mortgages on that home, but we're living in it. So we're making a community of that place where we're struggling to build that. And that has been the American dream until 20-ish years ago, when we have institutional investors who've decided that homes are a good investment. And so we build 200 houses, and then we take 190 of them off the market immediately and make them rentals at an exorbitant rate. And now that is the thing that is happening in California. And we are pricing most everybody out of our markets. And incidentally, it's also locking us middle class and even upper middle class. You can't move, because even if I were to sell my home, I'd have to buy a home. So I'd have to get a home somewhere, and I can't afford to do that. So my social mobility has been impacted by California's refusal to build housing and to ensure that those who are buying the houses intend to make a life in those houses, as opposed to make a profit.
And it's also affecting the calls, at least in the Sierra Pacific Synod, because unless the pastor is already wealthy, they
Yes.
cannot take calls where their pay is so low that they can't afford anywhere unless the church has a parsonage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I have heard that over and over again. And yeah, I mean, that is part of the struggle that this church is going to face, is facing now, is going to continue to face until the housing stock is such that we can reassess what being housing poor means in California. So I do not envy any congregations that are right now, especially anybody that's trying to pull a new graduate from the Midwest, from the South, like from anywhere.
Right.
If you don't already live here and own.
I find it to be really interesting in my town of San Carlos that I hear a couple sides of it, and one of them is it's a little town. There are places that we could definitely build, but there's not a great infrastructure to get in and out of San Carlos. It's basically a little 2-lane road to get in and out. And so the concern here is that if you I heard someone say stack and pack, is it's going to utterly just change the character of the town, which is an interesting thing to say. But also, I see that it's like, yeah, there's only 2 lanes to get in. And if you put 500 apartments in a place where you could easily go, that's going to really mess with all the infrastructure here, but at the same time, there are no people that can afford to work at McDonald's, Starbucks.
Right.
There's like every shop in San Carlos has a hiring sign on it right now. And it's not like, I think the In-N-Out by me, which is just like 3 blocks down, I think they're starting off like at $23 an hour, like, holy cow. To me, I go $23 an hour. That's good money right there, and yet it's constant, because people, but you can't afford a $4,000 apartment around, like you even on $23 an hour, so it seems so complicated, and at the same time it also seems very like we need more housing. We need to put more housing on,
we need more housing. It even changes the nature of adulthood, right? So if adulthood is living alone, which don't get me started on that isn't
right.
But if adulthood is living alone, but you can't afford to live without 4 roommates, then I'm 42 years old. Am I an adult yet? Like, if in order to live near enough to my home, in order to feel like I have reached maturity, and then I can complicate it even further, because a big area that we work on at LOPP is environmental, right? So if you build, which we should build everywhere, build what you can build, but if we build on wetlands, if we build on land that is unfit for habitation, if we build on land that burns every 2 years, we've already got home insurance agencies that refuse to issue policies in California because California burns every 2 years. And with climate change, that's going to continue to be a concern. Should we be rebuilding in paradise? Yes, build everywhere, but should we be building in paradise? Like that. Those are the kinds of issues that we encounter every day, from I hope from a faithful perspective here at LPP, but there are no right answers here. I have not gotten it all figured out. We are just a part of our ELCA community and ecology that has agreed to struggle with the questions together. That's all.
So what do you do when people, the ELCA is diverse, California is diverse, from the Central Valley to like San Francisco, they might have different values in faithful values that they might be advocating for. Like, have you ever received any kind of like pushback, or like, hey, we don't want you to advocate for this thing because this particular region wants to advocate for this other thing? I don't know. Do you know what I'm asking?
I know exactly what you're asking. It usually doesn't come packaged like that. It usually comes packaged as there's a separation of church and state, and our church should stay out of the state. And for better or for worse, I have learned how to hear that, accept that, and leave it to the side. Because for me, that feels like somebody who is not engaging with what is real and actual in this situation. The ELCA, through the social statements and teachings, which are intended to be used for our state public policy offices, our ELCA advocacy in Washington, D.C., my home office in Washington, D.C., the presiding bishop, when she goes to speak on Capitol Hill, when she engages with her peers in other denominations, using those same. So the person that says the church shouldn't be advocating in the public square, for me, has lost the plot. I try to say that as kindly and as faithfully as I know how. The other way that it happens is, about 2 years ago, we were working on a workers' rights bill. And it was never shouted, but it was always like, hey, Regina, come over here. Did you know that the bill that you're advocating for right now, ELCA Lutherans are not agricultural workers, they're landowners. Like in this scenario, you're advocating against ELCA people, not against their faith, but against the people. Like they are wineries, they are grape growers, they are orchard owners, and you're advocating for their employees. Do you realize that you're doing that? And I did, when I first started, no, I didn't. And once I found out, that doesn't change the fact that those workers deserve to have water in the fields, deserve to have lunch breaks. I mean, like, no, knowing that it was our people didn't change the truth of the matter. And, you know, do those people now not support what LOPP does? Maybe I haven't noticed.
But shouldn't we want our employers to treat our employees as well as possible in the name of Jesus, who calls us to side with him? Like, that doesn't make that's maddening to me that anybody would say that there's an us versus them in that. It's a us for each other in this.
Us for each other. I mean, in that situation, and this was all I thought about at the time, and I haven't thought about it in a minute. What was wild to me at the time is these were the employees, the field workers who literally grew the grapes that made the wine that we use for communion.
Oof. Come on.
Come on.
All
right, we've been going about an hour. I want you to talk about Lutheran Lobby Day. Can you tell us about that? And let's close out with Lutheran Lobby Day.
So Lutheran Lobby Day is your opportunity to come to Sacramento and advocate, actually do the physical lobbying. So 364 days a year, I'm willing to do that for you and to tell you about it. But on one day a year, Lutheran Lobby Day, you come to Sacramento and you do it and experience that for your own. I am going to hesitate to give the date this year, but typically it is the Wednesday before the Friday that is the House of Origin deadline. So, you know, the legislature has its own rhythms, and having previously worked there, I kind of know that the times that are best. So if we want to be able to hit them hard and have an ask, it is get this bill through its House of Origin, which has been roughly mid-May. It is after our Easter season, so you know, pastors are able to make it if they can. My policy council has been working on me for 5 years to get it to not be on a Wednesday, but like that's the day, guys. You got to come in and do it on the day. But it is always a ton of fun. This year, 2 of the 4 bills that we advocated for, one of them was SB4, another one was an environmental bill that we worked on. 2 of the 4 got signed by the governor, which in our business, a 50% uptake, a 50% passage rate is like unheard of. Nobody gets that. We put 4 hoping 1 would get through and we'd be able to like have something to say. All of our bishops from California make a point of being here. They're rostered leaders. This year, Bishop Brenda Boss of Southwest California Synod completely underwrote all of Lobby Day, so it was free to everyone. We're working on ways to continue that ministry. So it is the most fun I get to have at work. It really is. And every year, somebody for whom it is their very first time ever doing a lobby day. You know, I have literally done hundreds of these because this is my gig. This is what I enjoy doing. So this is my hobby. I've done hundreds, but every year somebody comes and says, "Oh my God, that was so much easier than I thought it would be." I'm like, yeah. And I'm not in those meetings with you. Again, like the one thing you'll hear me say again and again is your church is not telling you how to vote. Your church is not telling you how to speak to your legislators. I'm giving you information and I'm making an appointment for you. Now, in that appointment, you can talk about your dog's spot if you want to. That is your relationship. But we're giving you the information, we're making the appointment for you, and we make it fun and accessible. And please plan to join us. It'll probably be next May, the exact date. You'll have to stay tuned.
So what
Yeah.
exactly happens on a Lutheran Lobby Day?
So in previous years, you'll come in early that day, and we will have policy council. We have a new ledge coordinator who was our hunger advocacy fellow, and she did such a great job that we hired her full time. We go through the 2,000 bills that are moving in the California legislature, and we say, what do we want to work on? What will our advocates resonate with? What do we want to be talking about? And we do a deep dive information on that. And so people come in, we pray together, we worship together, briefly, abbreviated. And then we give you that information. And we tell you, this bill will change food labeling so that we have a better understanding of whether the food that we're buying is expired or will expire soon, and what the price of it will be, and whether it's safe to give in our food pantries. That was one of the bills that we worked on this last year. Then here's your appointments. You've got 4 appointments. Usually they're with your legislators and then somebody that's near you, but not always, and then we say, here are some tactics that tend to work. Hi, my name is Regina Banks. I'm with the Lutheran Office of Public Policy, California. We would love it if you would vote for this bill as it comes across your desk, either right now or it will come across your desk next month. Our social teachings tell us this, that, and the other. May we pray with you? Almost all of the offices will say yes. We take a picture. You're in and out of that meeting in 25 minutes.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very cool.
I had no idea. I've heard of Lutheran Lobby Day, and I had no idea that's really cool.
It is really cool. It is fun. It has happened that first of all, it is one of the biggest evangelical opportunities that we have. May we pray with you? Yes, we may. Oh, you've got a congregation that is in Davis, California? Yeah, we do. We'd be more than happy to have you. Our worship service is at 10 o'clock in the morning. Let us know that you're coming. We'll make sure that you feel welcome. That's literally evangelism that we need to be working on here. It is relationship building. Hey, we've got a public forum that we've been looking for a location to have. How big is your sanctuary? Oh, our sanctuary seats 400. We'd be happy to have you on a Tuesday night. That has happened out of a Lutheran Lobby Day. I mean, it is community building in your community. Again, I'm not in, I equip you for the meetings, but I'm not in those with you. So it is about you building that relationship with the legislators and their staffs who represent you. Yeah.
All right, and we want to give you the final word before we ask our rapid questions. Is there anything else you want us to know? For all of our listeners? This is your time.
I want to thank you both for this podcast. The expanse of this synod and by extension the expanse of the state. I have the hardest part of my gig is not explaining, not justifying my existence in the space. It is physically getting from congregation to congregation, getting from San Francisco to LA, from Reading to San Diego. That is hard, and connecting these areas. And even within Sierra Pacific Synod alone, I mean, we sit on so much land that can now be used for housing, but we sit on so much land, it makes it hard for us to know one another and know what it is that we're doing. And I think a lot of us would connect with the ministries that are going on in in our neighboring areas and with our fellow ministers if we knew it was happening.
Mm.
If we knew what was going on. And so this is just another way that we are able to do that. And I thank you, and I praise God for this part of your ministry. So thank you for having me.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you for that. All right, so 10 questions for you. Regina, which food can you eat every day?
Tea.
Hmm. What's your favorite movie genre?
Political thriller.
Salty, sweet, or savory?
Sweet.
In addition to the Bible, because most religious people say the Bible, pastors included, which book would you want with you on a deserted island?
Where the sidewalk ends.
Is that Shel Silverstein, right?
Shel Silverstein,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
What fills your cup?
Tea. But my niece and my nephew, their little voices are so cool.
And what depletes your cup?
Bureaucracy.
Mm. What's your favorite holy place?
The mountains. Mountains.
What was one piece of good advice that you've been given?
Sleep on it.
What does rest look like for you?
Unclear. What's that?
And on that last day, when you enter heaven, what do you hope that God will say to you?
Well done, my good and faithful servant.
Regina Banks, thank you so much for being on the Serrano Brothers podcast. Everybody, thanks for listening.